been months since the world died. My name is Joel Grimm, and I'm still standing, barely. The fortress has held through storms, hunger, and the dead. We've seen strangers become family, and hope turn into silence. But winter has come to Montana, colder, darker, hungrier. The animals are dying, the crops are frozen, and the air itself feels like it's holding its breath. We thought the undead were the only danger left. We were wrong. Because when the food runs out, the living become worse than the dead. The long drought, the days after the sickness began, felt longer than the rest of the apocalypse combined. The laughter that once filled the yard was gone. The children who had been our hope now lay silent, burning with fever in the infirmary we'd built inside the storage room. The well, our pride, our lifeline, had turned against us. The doctors said the contamination came from the corpse of a zombie that had somehow fallen in. Maybe it was drawn by sound, maybe by smell. It didn't matter. What mattered was that our water, our symbol of safety, was now poison. We boiled what little water we had left, collected rain in barrels, even melted snow. Everything tasted like rust and ash. At night, the wind carried the smell of sickness through the halls. Samuel, our physician, never left the infirmary. His wife Claire brought towels soaked in vinegar to mask the stench of rot. Sometimes she whispered prayers, sometimes curses. I stayed on the wall most nights, watching the forest breathe under moonlight. The fortress, my masterpiece, no longer felt like salvation. It felt like a tomb. A week passed before the fevers broke. 3 children survived, 1 didn't. When we buried him near the garden, the ground was frozen solid. We burned the shovel handles just to keep them from cracking in the cold. Meredith, the teacher, said a few words, simple ones, kind ones. The kind people forget how to say when the world ends. After that, no one spoke for a long time. When the first sunlight returned, Elias and I decided to dig a new well higher up the slope. We couldn't trust the old one again. We used a diesel drill and a hand auger, taking turns as the machine coughed smoke into the morning air. It took us 3 days to hit water. The first gush was brown, earth and rust. But after filtering, it cleared. We tasted it like wine, passing a cup from hand to hand. That night, under the soft hum of the generator, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Relief. Not hope. That was too fragile a word. Just relief. The next morning, the fortress seemed alive again. Elias tended the animals. The cows gave milk, the chickens laid eggs. Claire and Meredith cooked together in the kitchen, and the smell of baked bread drifted across the yard. It almost felt normal, almost. But scars don't fade in silence. Every creak of the gate, every thud beyond the walls made people twitch. The memories of that infected well, of the child's funeral, still clung to us. Amelia, my wife, tried to paint again. She used leftover wall primer and rusted cans of pigment to create something on an old door panel. When I asked her what it was, she said, "A window to what's gone." It looked like the sea. I hadn't seen the sea in over a year. The calm didn't last. It never does. A storm came in the night, violent, endless. The wind tore at the wooden gate, rain hammering against the walls until the sound drowned out our voices. By morning, a tree had fallen across the outer fence, splintering it like paper. No zombies came, but the noise must have carried for miles. We repaired it with whatever we had. Sheet metal, wire, wood from old crates. The mud was ankle deep, the air sharp and cold. By the time the wall stood again, we were soaked and shivering. I remember looking at my hands, cracked, bleeding, and thinking, this is what survival looks like. Not heroism, just pain repeated until it becomes habit. Then came the visitors. A man and a woman appeared at noon, walking slowly from the forest with their hands raised. They looked like ghosts, skin pale, clothes torn, eyes hollow. The man's name was Kurt. He'd been a mechanic. The woman, Ivy, a paramedic. They'd been traveling for weeks after their group was attacked by raiders. We kept them outside for hours, checking for bites, fever, any sign of infection. Samuel finally said they were clean. We let them in. That night, around the fire, they told us their story of cities collapsing, of people turning on each other faster than the dead ever could. Kurt said something that stuck with me. The dead don't scare me anymore. It's the hungry that do. Kurt fixed one of our generators the next day. Ivy helped Claire reorganize the medical supplies. It felt strange having new hands, new voices. We had been 12 for so long that the sound of laughter, cautious as it was, felt almost foreign. A few days later, the radio crackled to life. Static at first, then a faint voice, distant and broken. Survivors, Northern Ridge, old high school. Repeat. It was like hearing a ghost whisper through metal. We didn't know who they were or if it was even real, but the effect was immediate. The silence we'd lived in for months was shattered. Mason, my head of security, wanted to ignore it. People lie, he said. They bait you with hope, and when you show up, they take everything. Amelia disagreed. Maybe not everyone's gone, she said quietly. That night, we argued by candlelight, voices low so the children wouldn't hear. Finally, I said what no one else wanted to admit. If there's even a chance of another group, we have to try. The next days passed in preparation. We repaired the trucks, loaded them with fuel and supplies. Meredith promised to watch over the children, Elias to guard the walls. Before leaving, I walked the perimeter one last time. The fortress looked peaceful in the morning mist, walls strong, the garden green again, smoke rising softly from the chimneys. It looked like safety, but safety is just a story we tell ourselves to keep moving forward. Amelia hugged me before I climbed into the truck. Promise you'll come back, she said. I always do. I lied. We drove west, toward the mountains, toward the voice on the radio, toward whatever was left of the world. Behind us, the fortress disappeared into the fog. The road ahead was cracked and empty, lined with skeletons of cars and trees reclaiming asphalt. The air smelled of pine and rust. And somewhere far off, in the shadow of the northern ridge, a new story was waiting to be told. The road west felt like driving through a graveyard the size of a continent. The forests were reclaiming everything. Cracked asphalt split open by roots, rusted street signs bent under the weight of time. Every few miles we passed the shells of cars, doors torn open, glass scattered like bones. The dead were thinning out here, but the silence was heavier. Mason led in the first truck. I followed in the second with Kurt and Ivy. The air smelled like pine and diesel. Every so often the radio hissed, a reminder of why we were here. Then faintly, the voice came again. Survivors. Old high school. Northern Ridge. We followed the signal until dusk painted the mountains red. That's when we saw it. The high school. A red brick building standing alone, its windows boarded, surrounded by a fence of scavenged metal and wire. Smoke drifted from a chimney. For the first time in months, we saw a light that wasn't our own. Looks alive, Mason muttered, scanning through his rifle scope. "Alive's a start," I said. We approached slowly. A figure appeared on the roof. Rifle aimed. The sound of a single warning shot echoed across the valley. I stepped forward, holding up a white rag. "We're survivors," I called out. "We heard your signal. We want to talk." Silence. Then the groan of metal as the gate slid open. Inside were faces, thin, sunburned, wary. About 20 of them. Men, women, a few kids. They looked like they'd been starving, but not yet dying. A tall man stepped forward, the barrel of his rifle steady. A jagged scar ran from his jaw to his ear. "Name's Roe," he said. "You from the fortress on the mountain?" I nodded. "We are." He studied us for a long moment. "Then maybe we can help each other." That night, they fed us beans and bread made from cornmeal. The gymnasium served as their living quarters. Sleeping bags lined along the walls, a fire burning inside a steel drum. They had solar panels on the roof, a small garden behind the building, and a few goats. Resourceful, desperate, human. Ivy helped a woman with an infected wound on her arm, while Kurt examined their radio setup. Mason stayed quiet, watching everyone. Trust came slowly now, if it came at all. Roe joined me near the fire, his face lit by orange light. "You've got walls," he said. "We've got power and range. Maybe we can build something better together." "Maybe," I said. "But I've learned together is a dangerous word." He smiled, tired. "Yeah, so is alone." We stayed for 2 days. They traded us seeds, batteries, and a few working hand radios. We gave them antibiotics and some fuel. It almost felt like civilization trying to breathe again. Before we left, Roe handed me a metal case. "Extra batteries," he said. "You'll need them." "The nights are getting longer." I shook his hand, noticing how cold his fingers were. "We'll stay in touch," I said. "Don't make promises you can't keep, Grimm," he replied. The drive back was quiet. The mountains glowed with a dying sun, the sky streaked in red and ash. Kurt fiddled with the radio, trying to keep the signal alive, but all we heard was static. By the time we reached the fortress, night had fallen. Elias met us at the gate, rifle in hand. "You made it," he said, though his voice carried strain. "Something's wrong with the animals." We found one of the calves dead near the pen. No bites, no struggle, just still. Samuel inspected it and frowned. "Poisoned feed, maybe. Or disease. We'll have to cull the rest if it spreads." The loss hit harder than it should have. In this world, every living thing was precious. That night, Amelia sat by the barn door, staring at the shadows. "It's strange," she whispered. "Even now, I still expect to wake up and find this all a dream." I looked at her, at the tiredness in her eyes. "If this is a dream," I said softly, "we stopped waking up a long time ago." The weeks that followed were quiet but uneasy. The children recovered fully and began helping Meredith with her lessons. She taught them old world things, maps, stories, even poems. Their voices filled the yard, fragile but real. Kurt worked on restoring one of the old wind turbines we'd scavenged. He said if we could get 3 working, we could run the fortress entirely without fuel. For a while, we dared to believe in a future again. Then one morning, the radio screamed. Kurt came running, eyes wide. "It's the school," he said. "They're under attack." Static swallowed the voice, but fragments broke through. "Inside, they've breached the gym. Too many." Then silence. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to stop. Mason broke it first. "We can't help them," he said. "It's too far." Too late, he was right. But knowing that didn't make it easier. That night, I dreamed of Ro, standing behind the chain-link fence, his face pale in the dark, shouting something I couldn't hear. When I woke, I could still feel the cold of his handshake. The fortress changed after that. The children stopped laughing. Meredith still held classes, but the lessons turned somber. Amelia started carving pieces of wood into shapes, tiny animals, people, small fragments of the past she refused to let go of. Ivy spent her evenings staring at the sky, listening to the silent radio. She said sometimes she could still hear whispers beneath the static. Maybe it's just the wind, she told me one night. Or maybe it's ghosts. Same thing, I said. One evening, Mason joined me on the wall, a cigarette hanging from his lips. You ever think about leaving? He asked. Every day. Then why don't you? I looked over the valley, the dark forests, the rusted horizon. Because leaving isn't the same as living. He smirked. You sound like a preacher. I sound like a man who's seen what happens when people stop trying. A month passed. Winter crept closer. The nights grew colder, the stars sharper. We'd lost more animals. The crops struggled against frost. Supplies were thin again. One morning, while clearing snow from the outer yard, Elias found footprints near the north wall. Human, fresh, leading into the forest. Whoever had been there hadn't called out, hadn't attacked, just watched. We doubled the patrols, kept fires low, spoke in whispers after dark. The world was shrinking again, pressing inward like the air before a storm. I caught Amelia staring at the forest that night. Do you think it was one of them? She asked. Ro's people? Or what's left of them? I didn't answer. Some questions deserve silence. Later, in the radio room, I turned the dial slowly, hoping for something, anything. But the static only deepened. Still, I kept listening, because as long as there was noise, it meant the world hadn't gone completely quiet. And silence, I'd learned, was the sound of extinction.